Hi Bob. Thought I'd take this time to give you a little bit more thorough demonstration of the product. I know we have a little bit of time to enjoy it, but and I know you're considering what's a large purchase, and I wanted to take that time and really give you a personalized presentation of things, a little bit more under the hood, if you will. Hopefully you find this interesting. In any case, we can talk about TV and the speakers. We'll start with the speakers. It's certainly the bigger part of the purchase and certainly the most important in my opinion and how it can really transform sound. First of all, with regards to movies, to me, there's nothing more impactful than watching something with emphatic and powerful and accurate sound. I could have this television be 300 inches large, and if the sound wasn't enveloping and all-encompassing, it doesn't matter. We're having a conversation. It's just a distraction, the television. On the flip side, no matter how big the TV is or how small it is, if that sound is just driving it home what that movie's about, it makes the experience memorable and cinematic-like. So in sheer power, these speakers have over 16,000 watts of power. There's actually individual amplifiers for each driver. So there's actually 16 drivers, of which they have different purposes, which I'll come back to in a second. But each amplifier with its own amplifier and its own DSP makes it a very unique speaker for that reason alone. Traditionally in high end, you could have speakers much larger than this, and as we discussed, even more expensive than these. But even after all that, you still need to have large amplifiers. They could be these big monoblock amplifiers. Usually they run 220 volt. They have to run all the time to keep them warm. It just becomes overwhelming, let's put it that way. Here we have the solution of that high performance, but we just plug it in. It's again, like you bought that Ferrari, you bought that Porsche, you go to the dealership, you turn the key, and you're going to get the performance that it was engineered for. So I want to show you a little bit more about it. So I'm going to take off this cover here, give you a little bit of a view here. You notice all the drivers here. We also have a series of drivers all around it, as well as down here as well. Those serve different purposes. They can be just, I want to have a lot of sound, emphatic, omnidirectional sound, sheer power. But the real purpose of these speakers is that what we want to do is we want to have that controlled experience of a high-end speaker without reflection. If you remember, we talked about how typically most rooms where you put high-end speakers, or I should say speakers, aren't acoustically good. You can build a basement with acoustic panels, sit in the middle by yourself, and get great sound from a lot of different high-end speakers. But by and large, any of those high-end speakers, on top of all the issues of placement of amplifiers and wires and all these things that you don't want to deal with, there's also the reality that they can't sound good because of the fact that without the stopping of the sound reflection on walls, your ear is hearing that sound a million times over. So basically, like even in this video, I bet my voice sounds echoey because it's bouncing off of every space. It's not controlled. I'm sure I sound different if I point this way and this way and this way. Sound reflection is a big deal when it comes to getting good sound for your ears. We can't acoustically treat every room, mainly because most rooms that people want to live in have glass. Glass is a terrible acoustic properties. So what Bang & Olufsen has done is they've used technologies like noise canceling waves to actually what we call beam control. So the drivers around the sides can actually perform a different purpose than creating more sound. They have a purpose of mitigating or stopping those sound waves from happening before they hit other hard surfaces so that the sound waves ultimately just come to where you're sitting. That is the big breakthrough here. That each individual driver, each individual amplifier, each individual DSP is specifically controlled for the tuning of the placement that you want. But that doesn't mean that it can be just you. We can also tune it to be broader. So it can be a larger sweet spot, meaning there might be a little more sound reflection. Again, not as much as your traditional speaker, but a little bit more, but it's going to be a better sound for a larger audience. Or we can move the beam. So if it's a large open room and you like to enjoy an open dining table over here or a chair over here on a Sunday, we can have a tuning that is acoustically designed for that spot. And in the app, you can actually control it and say, you know what, let's steer the sound there and have it be optimal at that point. So that's a lot about the technology and what they're doing there. The genesis of how they got there was a very extensive project that they had for many years to commemorate their 90th anniversary. It was unique in that the company really just gave carte blanche to the designers. There's usually parameters, whether it's a price objective, a size objective, a design objective, all these sort of confines in how do we develop a speaker. Whereas here the goal was really just build the best speaker you can. And one fun story I like about it, I'll speak because I've gone to Denmark quite a few times, and I love speaking to the engineers and how they come up with these concepts. They knew that for the amount of power and the sound pressure that it creates, that the cabinet had to be otherworldly rigid. Wood is not a sufficient material. Plastic is not a sufficient material because, again, when you have sound drivers making sound waves, you want the sound to wholly be sent there. You don't want the cabinet absorbing the sound, and then actually transducing the sound into other spaces. You want it to be rigid, and that all the sound is protruding to your ear. So they spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to make such a rigid material. And ultimately, they basically sourced an engine block manufacturer. So there was a company in Denmark that has a form for building engine blocks. So the sort of cast metal engine block is how they came up with how they're going to make that rigid material. What was interesting is they commissioned them, and Bang & Olufsen set the parameters for how thick it had to be, how rigid it had to be, and they built it to that specification. But what was interesting is the outcome was that if you don't know how a form is made, there's basically the form of the shape where they pull the molten metal into it, and there's this sort of sand material that displaces the opening. So the holes inside of it, where the cabinet is, are displaced by this sort of special sand that keeps the cabinet in place from collapsing on itself while it's drying. Typically with an engine block, we're talking truck engine blocks, they would pull the form out, and then normally they would hit it with a hammer, and there'd be these little mini vibrations that would sort of almost shake the sand out. It would break it apart just enough that it would just fall out. What was interesting was that this cabinet was so rigid that they hit it with a hammer, it produced no vibration. And they had a hard time getting the sand to dissipate because it's under that heat, it's sort of molten together. So they actually had to invent a new process to extract it, which was they would build the form, they would let it cool to keep its shape, then they would heat it again for a short period of time to loosen the sand inside again to get that out. So the end result is, it's a 300-pound speaker, which I'm giving all my force here, and I am not able to move it. End result, extremely powerful. The other interesting thing was, I mentioned a little bit about the design. This is solid, steel or cast iron, I should say, a cabinet which, frankly, didn't look that good at the end of it. And they kind of knew that would happen because the shape of all the elements had to be a certain way for the actual acoustics they were trying to create. In other words, they were not making any compromises in that sense. But much like Bang & Olufsen, most high-end speakers would say, you know what, that's how it looks, that's how it's going to be, and people are going to love it because it's all about the sound. But they did not feel that was enough, of course. So like all of Bang & Olufsen's design, they're not actually done in-house. They believe that ideas stay fresh by outsourcing them. So they always get the leading industrial designers of the world to work on their concepts. And there's a bit of prestige with Bang & Olufsen in the sense that they get very renowned industrial designers to work because, again, they all want to have that reputation of building an item for Bang & Olufsen, which Bang & Olufsen does have 22 pieces in Museum of Modern Art. So they have obviously more industrial design awards than just about any electronics company, and certainly just about any other company in the world. So what they did is they commissioned, they lobbied a lot of different people to come up with a design, And ultimately, they found this, I believe they're from Germany, a German designer, which had this concept of what they call sails. You know, that it makes it feel lighter, so it sort of has these shapes of a sail on a sailboat. And they've actually implemented that in some applications. One of which was there's a building in Spain which was this big block. It was in the middle of a landscape that frankly had no place in being there. Like how it was approved ever architecturally was kind of interesting because it was completely out of place. There's no other tall buildings. It's on a beautiful grassy plain. And as an afterthought, they said, wow, this was a big mistake. And that company came up with this concept of sort of making this sort of ectoskeleton of a shape around the building. And all of a sudden, it literally flipped on end to become a very interesting design element in the landscape as opposed to how did that ever happen. So again, it's a very you know, unique concept. You know, again, how the shapes and how it all lines up. Again, it makes it a very interesting piece that you can look at for many years to come and feel that it's interesting. Also, as a side note, these colors can be changed. You know, Bang & Olufsen will have the speaker for many years. It's not uncommon. They keep a speaker design for 20 or 30 years. So they will come out with things. They already have come out with different colors. So while what we have in stock and what we priced for you was the design, as you see here, black with the oak. You could change that later if you want for whatever reason. The oak itself is obviously it's bent wood. It's similar to, you know, like an Eames chair or something like that. So they actually have a woodworker in Denmark that does high crafted wood, making those just like they do for high-end furniture. So there's really no element that wasn't the attention wasn't spent on. So that's a little bit about speakers. I could go on and on about different stories, but again, it's about a speaker that gives you that sheer raw power that you might want for whether it's movies or music. It's about a speaker that can correct itself for the room depending on where you are and where they are and the acoustics of the room. And it's in a speaker about something that becomes an interesting element that you just sort of look at for many years, and you know, like a fine car or a fine piece of furniture. It's not something that you need to hide. It's something that becomes something interesting that adds to the room. So again, hopefully that tells you a little bit about it. Again, I could go on longer. I do know a lot about the products, having done this for 25 years and the company itself. But to me, it is the epitome of Bang & Olufsen. High performance, high design, and just sheerly a beautiful product. The television, I think, is also an exceptional concept. You know, it is a 77-inch touch TV here. Again, the quote, by the way, that we talked about is for the 77-inch. You could go down to the 65-inch. The 88-inch doesn't come out for a little bit, and that's going to be based on the LG 88-inch, which is over $25,000 for just the panel, and that's if you get it from Best Buy. So that one I would probably say, and that actually brings me to what's interesting about the product, is that the panel can be changed. So if you ever want to get a bigger one or a newer model, everything here, the speakers, the lift, the surround processing, the control system is the same. The panel literally can be changed. It's literally just an LG panel. There's nothing unique. We're not marking up the price. It is the minuscule margins that televisions have, which again, you would laugh at how small the margins are. But again, the important part, the Bang & Olufsen part, that would stay the same for many, many years. And again, so instead of having a 77-inch TV with a big black hole in the middle of the room, it becomes, again, an interesting element. With regards to the TV, again, you know, this room is small. You would normally have the speakers out a little bit more. It really ties together well that you know the wood gets picked up, the oak, you know, shares the design element, and really ties it together with the aluminums and everything, which again is harder to see in the camera, but it is a full design concept. And again, the big black hole of the TV is no longer an eyesore. It's an interesting element in the room. And actually, since you were here, they actually added a new feature, which is, again, great because a lot of this stuff is about software. And the new feature is that we now utilize the open area for when you're listening to music to see what's going on. So now you can literally just use the remote, go to a certain tune-in radio station, access a playlist that you have from a music account, and actually see it right here. So it's kind of keeping you abreast of what's playing, which is nice. And depending on what you listen to, it might show cover art and things like that. So that's a lot of fun. And while you're listening to music, it stays in the down position. And then we can set preset audio formats on how the speakers should play, meaning should they have a wide format, should they be narrow, should they be seated for different positioning based on when you listen to music, just as a default. Further, we have hot buttons, which are basically like presets. The concept is that it memorizes your favorite settings. So if you like this volume, this radio station, or this TV source, this speaker group, this sound mode, you basically press and hold the button, and it's going to remember all that information so that when you press it again, it all happens. Another nice, small technology which really pays dividends in your enjoyment of the product. So then, as far as the television is concerned, again, you saw its movement, but in its down position, it's interesting. But when you turn it on, of course, it unveils itself. The speakers repurpose themselves. Again, you can also do things like if you wanted to have more of a night listening and not have these speakers on, you can have a sound group where this becomes an LCR, left, right, and center. So it can be self-sufficient on its own. Or for that matter, just consider the fact that maybe someday down the road, you might want to put these speakers in a room and do for music only, and the television on its own. So they both can work independently. So they don't need each other, but they play off each other very well. Let's see. So on the television, again, extremely powerful. Again, the point here is that the speakers with the television and designed for the TV are commiserate of the quality that these speakers needs to go with it. And then there's just the whole sort of system approach that when the television, when we go into the menu, which I could even show you, I can go in and tell it the speakers that are plugged into it, and then I have the ability to, the television already knows sort of how it needs to work together. So it knows that that I have the 17s for the rear, the Beolab 90s, and already the speakers in the television, and it already knows how to basically work with each other. What sort of crossover points should not try to achieve. In other words, it knows the 90s have extreme power and depth. So for those low frequencies which are not which are not directional, it's going to feed those sounds to those speakers. So again, people really bend over backwards and spend a lifetime developing high-end systems. And again, I appreciate that it's a hobby for some, but to me, it's very difficult to get to the point of a solution that is designed to work together from start to finish. Again, using that car as an analogy, there's no way that anybody can build themselves a Porsche better than Porsche can build it. It's just not possible. At least not for anywhere less than what a Porsche costs, let's put it that way, as far as building your own car. So yeah, I think that's a little bit about it. Obviously the integration is wonderful. One beautifully crafted piece of aluminum remote. I don't even remember if you got a chance to hold it, but again, it's just a nice touch of how things are built, because this is what you hold. At the end of the day, I use cars as an analogy a lot. Like, I just judge a car a lot when I close the door, how that feels. I can tell how the car is built. When I hold this remote, not a piece of plastic, it reminds me that, this is a quality product. Obviously I have the ability to control it with an app as well, and also this is also part of our multi-room system. So all of our other speakers for other rooms that start at $300 and go up, you can sprinkle throughout the house, and they can all play the same song or different songs. So again, another very unique quality, that this is a high-end system that is designed to work together as a whole. So again, I'm hoping that you can take some consideration. I 100% appreciate your offer in the price, and it's not insult taken, but there's just the reality of what the product cost is, both in production and development, and basically what that means to me and how much it costs me is a number that is difficult to come to. But due to the unique circumstances through the manufacturer and what I would like to do for you for the margin, I think it's by far the best price and percentage that I have ever given in 25 years on a state-of-the-art current system. So again, I look forward to speaking with you more, and I'm really hoping you will enjoy it. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm.